Okay, so this is the final part for Chapter 3. At this point, you should have your outline largely done, ready to be turned in. If not done all the way, it should be done all the way, actually. Should have had plenty of time in class. Anyway, so let's look at this. So, we're going to look at the northern maritime economy, and we see the word maritime, that is going to be shipping. All right, and economy is obviously money. So a West Indian trade is going to create the American merchant fortunes. In urban industries, you're going to get sugar producers, distillers, fishermen, and export businesses. I'm sure I've mentioned before, sugar was distilled into rum, and that is going to be one of the big exports/imports in and out of the New World. Transatlantic commerce is going to spur the growth of the port cities. So as this commerce is increasing, these cities are going to get larger. There's going to be more job opportunities. By 1750, your major cities are going to include Newport and Charleston with 10,000 people each. Those are your big cities. Boston had 15,000 residents, and New York had nearly 18,000. The largest port is going to be Philadelphia, whose population had reached a whopping 30,000 by 1776. So to us, that seems like crazy numbers, but these are really large cities at this time. Let's see, American shippers, they kind of went all over the Atlantic, but they also travel up and down the Hudson and Delaware rivers. Teamsters transported wheat, corn, and flour to urban markets. Transportation is going to spur new businesses such as taverns, horse stables, and barrel making shops. Because when we are distilling liquor, we need barrels. Yay, barrels. Which now are used for all kinds of things. I use them in my yard to grow plants. So, new businesses then. All right, your society is going to be kind of broken up into ranks. So it's not as strict as the English social classes, where basically born a peasant, die a peasant. These are going to be things that you can move up and down through. So wealthy merchants are going to be part of the upper class. They're going to dominate American citizens, and they are going to imitate the British upper classes through both architecture, consumption, and genteel culture. We'll talk more about Benjamin Franklin when we get there. But his biggest goal was to work really, really hard so he could retire and become an English gentleman, so that he wouldn't have to work anymore, and that his job could be being a gentleman. Your middle ranks are going to be your artisans, your shopkeepers, and this would be nearly half the population, and that's not much different than it is today with the middle class, the so-called middle class. Innkeepers, butchers, seamstresses, shoemakers, weavers, bakers, carpenters, masons. Other skilled workers are going to live in modest comfort, but most artisans are not considered well-to-do. They are not considered wealthy, and they aren't wealthy, not even considered. They just aren't. Your lower classes, this is going to be your laboring men and women, all the people that work for all these artisans and these wealthy people, etc. They make up 30% of the urban population, and they are dock workers and unskilled wage workers, washerwomen, wool spinners, servants, or, unfortunately, prostitutes. All right. So, after the Glorious Revolution, so remember that's when they overthrow Oliver Cromwell over in England. You take over of James II. No, we're not quite yet. No, that's earlier. Sorry. You'll get William and Mary coming in. All right. So after the Glorious Revolution, assemblies in the colonies are trying to limit the power of the crown. The colonial elite are going to lead assemblies. Men of wealth could be elected, but all men who owned property could vote. So even though you weren't wealthy, but you owned property, you could vote. Purposeful crowd actions were an important part of colonial society. Mobs expressed public discontent effectively. So if people didn't like something, they would all go stand in front of the courthouse and complain. Bureaucrats in England are going to relax control over the colonies when they're happy with the relationship. And this is going to occur very much during William and Mary's time. And this is going to be one of the things after the French Revolution, kind of the loss of that salutary neglect is going to cause the problems that are really going to lead towards the revolution and the Declaration of Independence. Colonists are going to take advantage of this relationship by increasing the power of their representative assemblies. So a lot of things are going to be changing. Okay, Britain's efforts to develop Georgia to protect the valuable rice colony of South Carolina is going to outrage Spain, which stepped up their seizure of illegal traders. In the process of mutilating an English sea captain named Robert Jenkins, in that process they mutilated the sea captain Robert Jenkins. So you get the War of Jenkins' Ear. So this is an 18th century imperial competition which is going to lead to British involvement in the war with Spain. So this is going to occur between 1739 and 1741. War of France is going to be the War of Austrian Succession, 1740 to 1748. Limited fighting in North America. Most of it's going to occur over in Europe. But the French are going to regain Louisbourg, the fort guarding the entrance to the St. Lawrence River. I don't know what that's called today. I'd have to look that up. If anybody's interested, you can ask me. If not, we can move on with our lives. Okay, so this is Sir Robert Walpole right here. He is one of the king's ministers, so one of the bureaucrats. Okay, so Britain allowed Americans to own ships and transport goods. Colonists are going to make significant gains in control of exports during the 18th century, and they're going to increase their trade relationship with the French, especially their sugar islands. Lack of currency in the colonies is going to complicate financial relationships. So there wasn't like a specific currency. A lot of stuff was done through trade, or gold and silver. So they used bills of exchange and the gold and silver coins earned in the West Indian trade until 10 colonial assemblies created public land banks to lend paper money to farmers who pledged their farm as collateral. So that's going to be like putting a mortgage on it. 1751, Parliament passes the Currency Act, which bars New Englanders from establishing new land banks and prohibits the use of publicly issued paper money to pay for private debts. The English are going to start to attempt to regain control of colonial economic pursuits. And this is going to be way too late for them to be doing this. The Americans are quite used to kind of operating on their own at this point because of salutary neglect. In the late 1740s, British officials vowed to reassert their power in America, which is an initiative that proves to have disastrous results. And this is where we're going to stop for Chapter 3. Next up is going to be Chapter 4. So please turn in any questions you may have about this chapter. Hopefully at this point between outlining it in class and listening to these lectures, that has answered most of your questions. But if not, please place a question in the question box and I'll be happy to answer it. Have a great afternoon, evening, or morning.